while everybody else starts coming in, I'd just like to welcome everybody here today, Kylie and Simon especially. I'll just go through the program and what we're about to do. So, first of all, Farmers for Climate Action would like to pay respects to the traditional land on which this broadcast is coming to you from, and to all the traditional owners of the land where their guests and speakers are coming from, and we pay respects to their elders past and present, and especially to emerging leaders. In my particular case, I'm coming to you from Wiradjuri land, Southwest Slopes in New South Wales. Now, we'll be using a webinar system today on Zoom, which means that we can't see exactly who is in the webinar as a guest. You'll only be able to see the presenters. I'd like to point out that you can use the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to ask the questions at the end of the webinar from that. Some people do put questions in the chat, and we'll try and pick them up, but we just can't guarantee we'll catch all of those. So that's how that will work. It's now 2 minutes past, so I think we'll officially get underway. So first of all, Kylie Birrelson is coming to us from 3N Consultancy to talk about microgrids. She has 20 years experience as an engineer and in the contracting sector. And she's dedicated to delivering practical, customer-focused energy solutions. As a key member of 3N Consultancy Group, she specialises in helping businesses, communities optimise energy use, reduce costs and transition to a more sustainable power solutions. Passionate about supporting Australian farmers, Kylie works closely with rural industries to develop and tailor microgrids and renewable energy solutions that enhance energy reliability and affordability. So I hand over to you, Kylie.
Thank you very much for that, and welcome today, everyone. I will just share my screen across. So, as mentioned, we're covering what are microgrids and how they can work for your farm. 3N works across small installations to community installs, from design to site installation, just so you understand a little bit of what we do and who we are. So what is an actual microgrid? We have solar panels, we have all of those things out there. Microgrids connect all of those things together. It takes your system to sort of basically a bit of a next level. So microgrids can be made up of, it could be simply solar and a diesel generator. It could be solar, grid, battery, biogas. It's whatever combination your site suits to make it basically feed out into then your load output. It offers a control system across that optimizes it and gives you the smarts. So a microgrid could be a single farm, or it could be a group of farms that have come together to utilize a microgrid or a whole entire community. So it takes all of that information and it optimizes your system for that. So what is the benefits of a microgrid? Why would you put a microgrid on your farm? It helps reduce the cost of infrastructure. So we had a client that is a small farm in Victoria. It was going to cost them over $60,000 in putting in power poles alone to get grid to their property. They could actually put in a microgrid for just over $60,000 that then they're not paying power moving forward. It also allows you to supply your power locally. So whether you're wanting power at like an irrigation system, security systems around the property, remote monitoring, all of them. It allows you that power locally without putting in that large infrastructure that's required in a traditional grid form. It provides you resilience of power. We're facing more and more natural disasters, whether it be fires or floods and those events that are interrupting power supply to those remote areas. It gives return on investment on a lower cost of power. So whether you're pulling from the grid or whether you're running a diesel generator, this offers you that control of optimizing, paying less for that diesel, it's paying less for that grid supply, and obviously you're getting the great advantage of decarbonisation and the future sustainability of it. It provides a more reliable and scalable energy source. So again, you're not relying on that grid, you're not relying on if you're isolated from a diesel supply viewpoint or there's issues with diesel supply in your area. Normally with a grid supply or even a diesel genset, there is limitations on how much power you can actually have, which limits your innovation and what you can actually do on your farm. So it provides that localized power that is more scalable, and the wonderful element of decarbonisation for that future sustainability. It also brings in the options of a lot of smarts behind it. So if we have a look at a microgrid, it brings in that smarts for the microgrid. It brings in better utilisation for your on-site generation. It can monitor things like your current usage and start tracking that. It can, if you have the input, have a look at weather, where that's coming in and whether it would pull from, so it can make the decision whether it's going to pull from solar, whether it's going to pull from battery, whether it's going to pull, if you have that grid connection, would it pull from the grid for that period of time? When and what is its most cost-effective solution to use at what point in time based on the data that it can collect? Obviously in remote areas, the grid can often go down. You can lose critical services during that process. So it enables you to reduce your grid losses. It enables you to keep your essential services running during times where there is more limited power available, whether it be driven by weather events or grid losses or anything like that. You can actually keep your essential services running, and it can do that smarts behind that as well. You can link to irrigation schedules, crop rotations, seasonal planning. So you can start it. It's not only providing you an additional, more cost-effective power source, it's actually starting to optimize the way you're using the energy that you do have as well. So how can you reduce your overall consumption? How can you schedule things to be operating at the most optimal time based on your power supply, based on your power usage that you're currently doing? And of course, with the constant battle of rising energy prices, whether again that be grid or whether that be diesel, it's something that we all face, that we need to try and reduce our dependency on those sources that just keep shifting and heavily impact our businesses. The other thing that a microgrid can do over sort of I suppose a standard sort of solar installation is that defect faults and performance monitoring. It can actually notify you when there is a concern rather than suddenly hitting the fact that you've got no battery power because your solar system hasn't been charging it, or some other event has occurred within the system. While pretty much all installations offer you the visibility, you've got to be looking and actively chasing that information. And as a general part, we find that people don't do that. They start relying on it heavily and not seeing that. So a microgrid can also offer that sort of connectivity that gives you that. Again, you could have remote island systems out in the field. They don't all have to be cabled and trenched and everything together. There is ways of connecting them and knowing what they're up to and what's happening out there without having to travel all the way out there and see those things, if that is something and functionality that you want as part of that. So microgrids, in summary, empower farmers with benefits of sustainable energy. It gives you a reliable, resilient power source locally, reduces dependence on traditional grids and lowers cost, and helps facilitate efficient energy management tailored uniquely to agricultural operations, and in particular your actual farm and how you want to operate it. It opens the door for innovative farming solutions, using advanced technologies. It opens up more options of things that you can power and things that you can do on site. We'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. And if it is viable, it can build that strong community by going across multiple farms, if that is of interest to your local group. So innovative ideas that microgrids bring to the table is the items like agrivoltaics. So it's dual solar farming. It's taking marginal lands for some people and actually turning them into producing lands. Now, that could be crops, or it could be things like creating grass areas for sheep. It reduces, like, we're constantly, well, not always in Queensland at the moment, we're battling against too much water. In other areas, we're battling against drought. Solar panels reduce that water evaporation. They do run down to feed to it. They provide that shade for lush grass that is more nutritious and more beneficial to animals, or as mentioned, you can actually be growing crops under them. There is some great studies out there of using marginal lands that people were not able to do anything with, or very minimalistic with, now actually producing due to the solar panels. You can also use it simply for like wildflowers, which then can help parallel crops and things around, or if for the small industry that it seems out there on the honey side of things, it also supports that. Or maybe it's just something that you enjoy doing and want as part of your infrastructure. For things like dairy farms, piggeries, feedlots, we can bring in biogas from the animal waste also into it. Microgrids can be made up of multiple supplies, whether it be solar, biogas, wind, all of that. So you're actually reusing what is sometimes a problem within your farm as well, and turning it into power. As mentioned before, you can do integrated irrigation, and also it brings in the power supply to do EV charging hubs for electric farm equipment and those things that maybe were not as cost effective before to run, factoring in the cost of the generator to charge and all of those factors. The great part around doing microgrids and anything to do with green energy is there is still a lot of green energy funding available out there to people. There is many different ways that can look at. We work with Liz Fleming, who is a grants writer. She's also a chartered accountant. She lives out west near Roma, so she's well aware of this industry, and she can have a look at where funding can be gained to support projects like this. She's also great at gaining funding for other projects as well. So we will share her information is on the screen, but we're more than happy to share that as well. And obviously 3N directly is also happy to work with any clients in conjunction with Liz to put those proposals forward and then that technology forward. So the whole idea behind microgrids is increasing energy independence for farmers. It's around adopting that technology and creating that resilience. And that's it for me. So thank you very much for everyone. I'll now hand
back to me. Thanks,
back
Kylie.
to you.
Just before we go on to Simon, now that everybody's in the room, I'll just like to let you all know what FCA does, or Farmers for Climate Action. We're an organisation of 8,200 members, farmer members. So we designate our members as farmers. We have about another 60,000 plus supporter members, which are people that are interested in what we're doing. And we're working on trying to help farmers adapt to climate change. It looks like I've just got a fire emergency that I just have to kill somehow or other. I'll go away shortly, I suppose. So we help farmers move into the future positively with innovation and trying to help them avoid some of the pitfalls of the transition. So that's basically what we're doing. The other thing I'd like to mention is that Farmers for Climate Action has a summit coming up in September, where we will be discussing our policies and what we should be working on in the next period of time. So anybody who's interested in that, look at our website. And also on the website is our toolkit, which has all the smart farming information in it, if you're interested. So with that, I shall move on to Simon. Simon Hackett is an interesting person from reading his biology. He was one of the team that created the ARNet, the first university sector version of the internet in Australia. That's pretty impressive. Before founding the Internet in 1991, 20 years later, Internet has grown into having 200,000 national broadband internet customers and 500 staff at the point that it was sold to iiNet. Simon joined the board of iiNet and later the board of the National Broadband Network. For the last 15 years, Simon has been focused professionally on solar and battery-based renewable energy systems. He was a major investor in a flow battery company. You might like to explain what a flow battery is. And these days he has a startup called Energy Autopilot that is working on software designed to improve the operational efficiency of homes and businesses that have deployed renewable energy systems. His family has a 200-acre farm in northwest Tasmania that has a 200 kilowatt solar array and a 400 kilowatt battery system. And he is on a mission to electrify everything on the farm that currently burns diesel. Good idea, Simon. So I'll hand that over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And my part of the exercise today, as you've heard from my little CV, I've got a high degree of interest in renewable energy systems and making them work. And I'm sitting at our farm today here in northwest Tasmania that's been described, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the slideshow as I chat a bit about what's going on at the farm. my part of this exercise is kind of a case study of what a microgrid can look like in the real world. So let me find the right thing to share on my screen here. Just a moment. As always, everything works except the technology. Let me just find there we go. And see if I can succeed in sharing the right screen. There it is. Okay. So can we see that?
We can. That's it.
Yep. You see a nice picture of a farm, a nice picture of a valley. So as I mentioned, we bought about 8 years ago, we bought this farm called the Vale in northwest Tasmania. And the Vale is in a very pretty place, as you can see. That's a mountain at the back of our property called Mount Roland, about 4,000-foot mountain. And our farm is the area you can see at the bottom of the valley there. This photograph was taken from an electric vehicle that's slightly unusual. I own an electric self-launch motor glider. And so I was wafting above the property here, having taken some photographs. The reason I can do that is that the farm actually has a runway on it. That's the blue dotted lines there are actually the boundary of the farm. And you might see between the kind of top left and bottom right-hand corner of the blue dotted lines on that page, there's one very strange, long, thin paddock. And that's actually a 1,300-meter long runway. So we have a runway right on the farm. And we are fortunate. I'm a dead keen pilot, so we were very fortunate to buy a property that happened to already have a runway on it. The runway's been there about 50 years, so it's really quite a remarkable asset, both for us to be able to fly in and out, which we do from our other home in South Australia, but also it gets used by emergency services during the annoyingly increasing number of natural disasters that we all seem to face in the world. So this runway gets used for emergency services, firefighting, and similar things. We're very happy for the community to have that available as an emergency services asset. What we have on the farm is about 600 sheep and about 100 cows. And like most farms, farming sheep and cows is a difficult way to make money, and the way we intend to have the farm be a bit more self-supporting than it currently is to add a third income source, which is ecotourism. We're in a very pretty place here, as you can see, and so we are just starting to gear up to have people staying on the property, sometimes flying in their planes, sometimes just driving in, and coming to see the nice sheep and cows and the platypus that runs through our river. So it's a very pretty spot. In the context of microgrids, one of the reasons I wanted to build a really serious microgrid on this property, other than that I really like this sort of thing, was to try to make a real exemplar of what a fairly serious scale microgrid looks like and how it works, and to be able to show it to people. So I'm going to show you some photographs of it here. First, out of interest, that's actually a plane. That's my plane landing on the runway. And this, more importantly, is the other plane. So this is that electric motor glider. We have other electric vehicles, but this one literally has lithium-ion batteries, and you charge it up off the sun and you go flying. So there are other sorts of transport that also don't burn things, and that's one of them. When we bought the farm, it had a lot of power meters. We're all very familiar with these things. It had multiple power meters running to multiple buildings around the property. And apart from all the cobwebs, I had an immediate interest in getting rid of all of those and just having one power meter running into a microgrid and having control over the way I used energy in the property, precisely the sort of way that Kylie's described it. We're very much an exemplar in doing that. So we immediately set out on a process to build a microgrid on the property. And we decided that the property had overhead private poles running around it to distribute power, which were both ugly and not very high powered. This is an aerial photograph of a bit of the property. And you can see here these spots marked P0, P1, P2, P5. These are pits. So we designed a process where we would actually dig the power lines into the ground and bury them so that so we literally couldn't have trees fall through them. One of the things that happens in the northwest of Tasmania is we get windstorms. And one of the windstorms we've had since we built the microgrid took power out in the local area for almost a week. And that's just because there are so many power lines and so many trees, and often those two don't mix. So by undergrounding the power, it meant that we were very resilient on our property. to that particular problem, as long as you've got batteries and solar. So we started building serious systems out there. This is some photographs taken during the process of building it. We built a 200 kilowatt solar array. As you can see, it's on ground mount devices out in a field. I'll come back to some of the benefits of that. That is more expensive than whacking it on top of existing rooftops, but there's some real benefits in sticking it in an otherwise unshaded field like that. And we started seriously digging the ground up. There's some examples of some of the trenching we started running around the place to put up these nice, pretty solar panels. That's an example of one of the longer trenches. We had an interesting challenge. We needed to take that trench both under the river and under the runway, which we did in order to reach the other side of the property. This system goes from that farm shed you can see in the background where the batteries are and where the grid connection comes in, and it runs around to every other building on the property, including, you'll see a photo of it later, a new house that we're building on the other side of the farm. So the whole thing is connected into this single energy grid. Because we had to go a fair way, we stuck a fair few wires in the ground. There's actually 16 conductors sitting there in that pit to go the long distance from one side of the farm to the other. So it's all pretty high scale stuff. And I must admit to quite enjoying having this amount of infrastructure built on the property. It's the sort of stuff I get up in the morning to play with, or in this case, to watch electricians play with. I certainly didn't do any of this wiring. I got people that know how to do it to do this. But there's all that system going in. We've got big solar arrays and other bits and pieces. We moved the grid connection over to be near where the batteries are. So I paid TasNetworks a significant sum of money to go and move the incoming power pole over and put a big new transformer up like that. In that usual way of power companies, they're perfectly happy to have you pay them in order to then charge you money to use what you paid them to put in. And so there's that connection. We stuck all sorts of other stuff around the farm. That's a cabinet going into the middle of the farm, and into that cabinet wound up being both a central distribution point for our power network, but also a computer network. My history, as you've heard, is in computer networking. And whenever I dig a hole in the ground and put power in, I also throw an optical fiber cable into the same hole. So there is high-speed optical fiber networking running between all of the buildings on our property as well. In the modern world, those computer networks are increasingly useful. So yeah, whenever you're sticking a hole in the ground, throw a fiber into it. That's the resulting solar array, sitting there quite happily in what used to just be a sheep paddock. See the power connection coming in. There's a little bit more solar, a few more solar panels sitting on the roof. But it just sits up in the top corner of our farm, a nice sunny spot that, as you can see some shadows there, but the shadows really don't reach that array very often at all. It's in a really nice spot on the farm. These are some of the ugly private poles. We got rid of those. One of the things I want to mention about sitting solar panels out in a field like this is the sheep. The sheep really like it. This paddock didn't have shade, and now the sheep have got shade to hide under when it's sunny. The grass grows significantly better under the solar panels than it does outside of them, because again, it gets shade and it's cooler under there. So from my point of view, putting solar arrays in a field like this is really the gift that keeps on giving. It's a second use of that field that doesn't at all conflict with having sheep running around underneath them. We absolutely like running EVs connected to this lot. One of my real missions on the farm is to stop burning things. And so every time I can buy an electric vehicle to replace a non-electric one, I do that. Not just the electric glider, but there's an electric Tesla sitting there. We've got a few of those, a few EVs in the place. I'm looking at some electric zero-turn mowers at the moment, because we actually do a fair bit of mowing around various things on the farm. I'd love to buy electric tractors. Unfortunately, the scale of tractors we want, kind of, the big John Deere size, tractors. I saw a press release on the John Deere website years ago, dating back as that John Deere have been on the verge of releasing electric tractors next year for about the last 12 years. Unfortunately, they still haven't done it yet. You can get some little tractors. We have an interest in a winery in California, and they're about to buy an electric tractor, a little one, the sort of ones that runs around between the rows of wine grapes, actually harvesting them. So we're getting there with that. But very keen to have everything we can that's diesel removed and replaced with something that isn't. Next thing I want to talk about briefly is batteries. It was mentioned that I had an interest in a flow battery company. That company is or was called Redflow. This is a company I spent about 15 years being highly involved with. Flow batteries are a very cool alternative to lithium-ion batteries. Lots of cool attributes to them. One of the nice ones is that they don't burn. They don't have fire risk inherent in them. They have a fluid inside them in those tanks. The fluid's actually fire retardant, so it's a really nice concept. Unfortunately, Australia is one of the harder countries in the world to successfully start a manufacturing startup. And after a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of shareholder support, unfortunately, Redflow had the wheels fall off in terms of capital raising, and the company is now in voluntary administration and is being sold off for parts. Sniff. So hopefully someone in some other country will buy the intellectual property of that and fire it up again. But in the meantime, I had some Redflow batteries on the farm. I've now changed them out for good old-fashioned conventional lithium ones, which work perfectly well. But yeah, I'm a bit sad I can't use the flow batteries anymore. So this is what we do have on the farm now. Those are lithium-ion batteries. These particular ones are from a company called Pylontech. And each one of those boxes is just under 5 kilowatt hours of storage. So what you're staring at there is about 200, and there's 2 lots of those. So in total, we have 400 kilowatt hours of energy storage, which is a very great deal. I come from the school of thought that too much energy storage is never enough. So there's heaps of it there. And it does mean that we very rarely use the grid. It's a nice situation. We stay on the grid because we get paid some pocket money for exporting our surplus energy. So the grid's very much our friend, but it's not something we rely on. Those batteries are connected to something. You have solar inverters connected to solar panels. These are battery inverters. The company we've chosen, the product we've chosen to use for the battery stuff is a really cool company called Victron Energy. This is a cluster of Victron Energy battery inverters. So these are the things that take DC power from the batteries and turn it into AC power to run the farm. And Kylie mentioned the notion of wanting to control these things for optimal performance. Victron make a really nice system controller, a thing called a GX. So this is a picture of it humming away not so long ago. At the point where I took this picture, that 200 kilowatt solar array was making 100 kilowatts. And we were charging batteries up with it. We were running 10 kilowatts worth of load on the farm, and we were still pushing 60 kilowatts out to the grid to make some pocket money. We have approval to export the entire 200 kilowatts to the grid, and at times we very much do that, which is nice. We don't, like the amount you get paid to export to the grid is slowly diminishing for all of us. That's just a fact of life for various non-sinister reasons. And it's one of the reasons I'm very keen to use that solar array to charge electric vehicles, because you wind up much more economically benefited by using electricity instead of fuel versus what you get paid to export that energy. In other words, the amount of money you save not buying fuel makes the electricity remarkably cost effective as a source of motive power for your vehicles. We do have a generator as well. So a fairly decent 65 kVA genset there, just in case all else fails. Again, I mentioned that we had the power in this area fail for a whole week. As it happened during that week, it was sunny after the storm, so we didn't need to use the generator. But you can get runs of weather that mean that there just isn't enough solar energy to keep the wheels going. So for backup on backup, we've also got a generator, and that Victron system automatically fires this generator up if it's needed. Lots of switchboards, lots of cables, lots of stuff. It's a very high-scale system. And as I said before, the nice thing is you see the happy sheep very happily using the shade around the solar panels. The other thing we're building on the property is a new house, that one. It's got about 3 or 4 months to go. It's a pretty nifty house, whole separate story about that, but it's a nifty house that we're going to move into in a few months, and then we'll be renting our existing houses out for ecotourism, as I mentioned earlier. One of the things I've put in the house as an exemplar again of energy efficiency is a thing called a geothermal heating and cooling system. These things are not all that common in Australia. They're very common in Europe. Geothermal systems, like microgrids, aren't cheap to put in, but they're incredibly cheap to run. They're incredibly cheap to operate. That geothermal system has got, I haven't got a photo of the drilling here, but it's got 8 pipes that disappear 100 meters into the ground. We have 8 100-meter deep boreholes that fluid runs into outside the house. That accesses the temperature 100 meters down in the soil, about 13 degrees Celsius, 24 year round in Tasmania. And it means that the heating system doesn't have to work nearly as hard. It's only got to get from 13C to whatever temperature you want. Doesn't matter how hot it is outside, doesn't matter how cold it is outside. Very cool system. And what it does do is heats up water tanks that are insulated, hot and cold water insulated tanks, and they act as heat batteries. So when the sun's shining, we make hot water, and then in the evening, we just take that hot water through this system and push it through the floor. It's a conventional hydronic underfloor heating system in the house. It's just that it has this less conventional way of actually making the hot water using this very efficient geothermal system. So that's a bit of a fast zap around the farm here. What do I want to tell you about? We've got a very good result out of this. One of the reasons I have a huge solar array, 200 kilowatt solar array, is so that it still works well in winter. Tasmania is the worst place for solar in winter and the best place in the country for solar in summer for the same reason, right? Very long days in summer, very shorter days in winter. But even in winter, we get enough power out of that array to charge the batteries and run the farm. That's the idea. We are currently on the hunt for some electric four-wheel drives. BYD have just started selling a hybrid one. As soon as they sell a pure electric one, I'm probably going to buy one of those. And otherwise, as I mentioned before, I'm on the hunt for electric tractors and other electric bits and pieces. But yeah, there you go. There's a bit of a fast tour around what we think is a pretty impressive microgrid. What we have got out of this, just briefly, is we've got, as Kylie suggested, we've got a single unified energy system that we control. It's very high availability. The power doesn't go away. It's very high resilience because we undergrounded it. Nothing breaks that system, so we've always got power. And the ecotourism we're moving into is going to be pretty high-end stuff. And you really don't want the power to fail when you're entertaining, highly paying guests. So that's great. Only got one power meter now on the farm, the one that comes in, and most of the time that meter is recording exports, not imports. And we're really happy with it. There you go.
Thank you, Simon. That's very interesting. So now we'll have some questions. I'll just get them up. Yeah. So the first question we have comes from, that's an interesting name, Sealand. Anyway, sorry about that if I've got your name wrong. Most farms contain multiple titles within the contiguous whole farm. Due to the current constraints, it seems farmers need to install solar arrays on each title, as using the mains network for using this solar around the farm is not currently an option. What are the roadblocks to this concept? Maybe one for Kylie, or maybe Simon's got a view. So.
From our viewpoint, it comes down to maybe going off the actual main network. It's a difficult one to answer because it is really dependent on exactly the logistics of the location and how it's formatted and the costs involved in that. It is definitely a roadblock if you're trying to get power, like significant power from one location to another location. As Simon demonstrated, they did a pilot trenching and all of that. You'd have to do return on investment analysis. Happy to have a look at it. Happy to have a discussion about the more details behind that as to what's viable and what's not.
Okay. Just in addition to that, question that's always concerned me is I've seen it done in one place in New South Wales where the farmer was able to use the current grid outside his farm to transport to other farms, because lots of farmers have farms in different parts of the state. Is that easily done, or is that special circumstances, or it depends on states? Any comments on that?
It heavily depends on the state.
It's a regulatory question more than a technical one.
Yeah, absolutely. In Queensland, it's a nightmare. I think like South Australia is a lot more flex. Simon lives there. He might have additional comment, but from what I've sort of seen, they're a lot more open to those sorts of conversations. Yeah, it really depends on the distance and regulatory, as Simon said, rather than a technical.
Yeah, there's and you get interesting situations. When we put our system in, our next door neighbor said, "Wow, I've got a house right near your solar panels. Can you sell me some power?" And the answer is, "Gee, I wish I could." But our research at the time, noting I am not a lawyer, but I do actually have one in the office, Our best understanding of the regulations was interesting. We couldn't sell power to our next door neighbour because then we become an energy grid in competition with the real one. And regulations exist to create a situation where there is only one energy grid. But if you but we couldn't sell it, but we could give it away. It looked like our understanding was that the rules got broken when you started actually selling power. If you can, my understanding is you can trench power across property lines. If you own both sides, if you do own the titles each side, I think it is actually okay to do that as long as you're not actually charging money for it. But I may be wrong, right? There's some of the stuff that we do in practice involves asking for forgiveness rather than permission, to be perfectly honest.
You can also co-invest. That's the other way. That's where like group farms, your neighbours could hand over a nice lump sum of cash to help with the initial investment, and then you're not an energy provider, you're actually co-investing in the market.
Yeah, exactly. You're not selling energy, you're actually doing some shared infrastructure. The other thing I wanted to briefly mention, there is an energy provider with an interesting name called Local Volts, one word. And I've had a chat to them at times. They actually do offer a situation where if you're using them in multiple spots even around the country, they'll do the sums about what it costs to move the power around and basically use interesting accounting to let you, in principle, sell your power over here and buy it. Someone else can buy it over there. I don't understand how they're making that work, but they do think that they are making that work. It hurts my head a bit though. And we are in an evolution about these things. My personal view is it'd be nice if the energy grid could be used as a marketplace by other people. And effectively local vaults are an example of trying to create, in a virtual sense, that sort of marketplace.
I'm sure we'd all like to see some flexibility in going forward, but anyway, we'll keep working on it. That's what we do at FCA.
Absolutely.
I've got a question from Kelly. Simon, if the red flow batteries were already in place, why did you pull them out? Was it an O&M thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. Redflow, because it was building a unique battery, had to go through a lot of challenges about getting those batteries reliable. And the array I had was the last of the previous generation of batteries before they sorted out a lot of those reliability problems. So that the batteries I had were progressively failing for reasons that had been fixed in the next version, except I couldn't get the next version anymore. So basically, it was all going to slowly fall apart in terms of providing energy. So I've just took the step to swap them out since I was starting to have some of them fail under me. So sadly, yeah, it stopped working.
Very good. Jeff would like to know, he accepts that it's an amazing system, which I'd agree with. But can you talk about any of the costs or the return on investment?
Yeah, I can. I do want to preface it by saying I have been incredibly fortunate in business. And because I was incredibly fortunate in business, I built this system anyway, if you know what I mean. I didn't do an ROI calculation. I just wanted to have the resiliency and the independence. So I just spent the money anyway. So I didn't do maths up front to decide if it was economically rational. This is our forever home, and I wanted to make my own power. Sense of scale, it is a hell of a big system. It probably cost me about $600,000 to build. It's that kind of scale. Bearing in mind that there's an awful lot of copper in the ground. It's $200,000 worth of copper in the ground. It's really quite a big system. In terms of actual return on investment, at the moment, the income we gain from exporting power, we have got permission to export all 200 kilowatts. Currently, that earns us about $15,000 a year in export of power we don't use. That's actually a reasonable return on the cost of the solar array itself, which is about 250 or 300K of the overall build. But that will slowly diminish, and the way we're going to get that ROI is by avoiding the cost of diesel in the future, as I mentioned. Right, the more we can actually use that energy to run vehicles instead, the more we can make things work better that way. And we obviously don't have a power bill. We do. It's a negative power bill. So yeah, actually, there's a few other. We get some other ROI from a thing called the LGCs from the system. It's a net effect it's about $20,000 a year that we actually earn for it, but we're avoiding the cost of buying any power from the farm, and we're avoiding increasing amounts of fuel costs as well. So, look, I think in practice, once we've finished putting more electric vehicles into the place, that we're probably going to be saving more like $50,000 to $80,000 a year that we wouldn't otherwise be spending. And then it starts getting interesting. But again, I built it because I wanted to. And so, yeah, there's that.
Very good. Seelan again would like to know why consumer grade solar arrays have, why they don't have solar tracking when commercial solar farms do. Is it just a cost thing, or?
You mean physical, presumably physical solar tracking, moving the panels around?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the reality is that solar panels, they're so far down the cost reduction curve that just whacking more panels in is a hell of a lot better economics if you've got the space than putting in mechanical gear to move the panels around. If you move the panels, you might get 15 or 20% more efficiency out of them, but you've got to maintain the motors. And in a windstorm, the whole thing can literally be torn out of the ground, right? You've got a big sail there and you have to stabilize it. Anything that's mechanical is a maintenance problem, as any farmer faces it a variety of ways, right? So in my opinion, just whack more fixed solar in. The beauty about a farm is you've generally got the space. It's not about commercial versus residential. I haven't seen a whole lot of tracking arrays go in a lot of years, because the most tracking systems I've seen are sitting there broken. You just put more panels in. Also, the other thing is if you're putting them on buildings, traditionally you think about putting panels facing north in the southern hemisphere. Actually, east and west works really well, because it turns out you get the power when you're often using more, certainly in a residential situation in the morning and evening. We've got an office in Adelaide where we've got panels on every available roof, including the south-facing roof. South-facing roofs are about 25–30% down on what you get facing it north. Panels are cheap, and impressively in winter, it turns out the sun actually goes further around the universe than you might think, and the panels actually get lit up early in the mornings in the south and late in the afternoon in the south as well. So just whack more panels in.
Good. John wants to know, how close is bidirectional charging?
On cars, presumably.
Look, I don't know what
yeah.
bidirectional charging is. So.
Yeah, well, then logically cars, right? There's a thing called V2G, vehicle to grid, that's the holy grail, and it keeps being nearly released. There's some challenges to do with standardization of with accreditation of the equipment against Australian standards. That's the main thing that's slowing stuff down at the moment. It's not a technology problem. I have got a slight conspiracy theory though about it, which is that there's very few car manufacturers that officially support it, and the conspiracy theory is the wrong way to put it. Here's the challenge for a car manufacturer: they provide a warranty for the battery in your car, but lithium batteries wear out as a function of how hard you work them. If you don't use them, they last forever, right? If you do use them a lot, they wear out slowly over time and they reduce capacity over time. Your car manufacturer has thought about how far you're going to drive your car. They haven't thought about the idea of then filling up and draining the battery multiple extra times, maybe, every day, filling it and draining it, filling it and draining it. And so you're going to work the battery so much harder that I suspect the car manufacturers are a little afraid that their warranty is going to be called on for a use they never expected the batteries to be put to. So it's going to need the car manufacturers to kind of get used to the idea a bit as well, and make sure that they're prepared to cope with that. But it's not a technology problem. It's a problem about warranty and a problem in some cases about regulation. I think we will get there finally this year, we hope.
What have we got here? I'm not sure if this is I think it's a statement, but anyway, Jeff's saying there is a virtual energy network where you can sell your power to other people on the network via an app. And my understanding is buyers are getting it cheaper than their energy rates, and sellers are getting a better rate for their sales.
Yeah, that sounds like the other one I mentioned, LocalVolts, is also doing a similar thing. So so there are people trying to actually produce the commercial constructs that make sense here. That's good.
Yep.
There should be more of it.
Anonymous attendee would like to know what the payback period for a microgrid might be.
Yeah, good question. I said I haven't done payback calculation on mine. I just wanted to build it anyway. One of the things to think about is the lifetime of that system, which is what someone like Kylie will then feed into a payback calculation. And the useful thing is that solar panels these days have got, the good ones have got 30-year warranties on them. Batteries have got at least a 10-year warranty. And after that 10 years, they haven't stopped working. They've just lost a bit of capacity. You probably will get 20 years out of those at least. So,
yeah. We work on average of about 25 years. It depends on it's how long's a piece of string. We did an analysis just this week. It was a 10-year return on investment on over 25 years. It makes it very worthwhile. Sometimes we can also scale it for a client. So there's an initial and you sort of keep reinvesting almost that savings. It is case by case. That is something that we can offer and review for clients. Sometimes I'll put my hand up. We have killed a couple of systems where we just go, no, this at this point in time it's not viable for a range of reasons.
right.
Very good. Now, Mark would like to know whether Simon has considered using an anaerobic digester to turn on-site organic waste into power and fertilizer.
No, I haven't. I haven't considered anything of that sort. I tend to just throw more solar panels at.
Very good. And that looks like I'm good, right?
There's a couple of questions in chat that
There are actually.
Wouldn't mind answering quickly if I can. There was one about because we did talk about sheep under solar panels, where the cattle can go under solar panels. Yes, they can is the short answer. It comes down to return on investment. You normally do need to put the solar panels up a little higher. You do also, the comment was made about them rubbing on it. So yes, you do need to make sure that structurally they can use it as a scratching post, as they like to do. So the short answer is yes. It comes down to whether it's cost effective in that particular scenario. Same as with crops underneath, you can put your panels at whatever height you need to grow whatever, like there's a lot of really big success in wineries. So obviously the solar panels at their normal height doesn't work in wineries. The other one is what is the biggest hurdle that we see for people putting in microgrids? There's two that I see. One is obviously cost and return on investment. We are working on that, and obviously with panels coming down in pricing, batteries coming down in pricing, all of that functionality improving, it is getting better. The other one that we see, which kind of feeds into that return on investment, is remote areas having people skilled and everything to install them. We do sort of what we refer to as a pod type system, where a lot of it's actually built locally here in Brisbane, and then it can go to site. The install is less, and we can train people locally and support them in that install. And then ongoing maintenance is also with remote monitoring and that analytics that can be done. It is becoming easier and easier to overcome that hurdle.
Very good. Now I've got a couple of other questions that have just come in. We've covered the return on capital and everything, but I guess some people would like to know, for a sort of an average size farm, whatever that might mean, anything from several million acres down to 1 or 2, what sort of costs are people looking at when you're doing these things? Like upfront costs.
That is how long is a piece of string?
I mean, I guess
if you're a dairy farm, you chew a lot of power. If we actually don't chew a lot of power in farming, we chew it in other things. It really depends what you're doing. What you're
using, right?
Yeah. Well, like my example was a $60,000 system that saved them $60,000 putting in poles. Simon's was 600. So yeah, it does depend on power. It does depend on what you're trying to achieve and location, and sorry.
A couple of more practical questions. One, if you do put one of these things in, how much sort of electrical knowledge does the owner have to maintain it, or how do you?
Almost none.
None.
Yeah. They're
I
brilliant.
yeah, I would say none. As I said, that's like for us, the way we work, there's the option of that remote support if something does happen, if something does come into it. They are educated at the time of install. As Simon showed, there's very simplistic control systems out there that are very, very user-friendly. If the chances of an electrical fault, like how long has yours been in place, Simon?
Oh, years. And there's been nothing I would describe as an electrical fault as such. Ever.
It would be very, very rare for an electrical fault to come into it. So none.
Yeah, in fact, the one thing I did on this system that is that you can a good installer will do this anyway. You can install things called automatic transfer switches, right? Which is just a switch that automatically bypasses all the complicated stuff if the complicated stuff stops working.
Yeah.
And just connects the grid straight back to the farm.
Yeah.
Right? Because all the energy is flowing through the battery control system and all this lovely stuff's there. That means it doesn't matter if the grid fails. But if that electronics does fail, you just have an automatic switch that just goes clunk and the farm's back on again. And it means that the people that put the system in can fix it up for you. But in the meanwhile, there's no emergency.
And another question based on what you're just sort of saying there, Simon, the reverse of that, if the grid goes out, and I've had some members ask me questions about this, whether they can actually continue to run their solar system.
Yes, and the answer is yes, if you've got batteries.
Yes.
If you've got batteries.
Yeah.
And you don't need special switches or something? Or?
No, because the battery system simulates the grid.
Yes.
So the grid passes through the battery in the electronics, comes down to the farm. You turn the grid off. This is still making a pretend grid. AC solar inverters, the conventional ones that most people install, they won't. There's always exceptions, right? Some modern ones actually can work without a grid and without batteries, but in general, they synchronize to a grid, but they're perfectly happy to synchronize to a simulated grid. The one extra bit is what you do need is a way to start it all up if it all goes completely flat. And there's two ways to do that, two right answers. One is have a generator on site, which is a solution. Again, in case the grid's out for ages is what I mean, right? Yep. The other one is you can connect some of the solar panels directly to battery chargers instead of being on AC things. So some of the solar panels just can actually charge the batteries directly, just a different way to wire them up. And those, if the whole thing goes flat overnight and you don't have a generator or the generator doesn't start, when the sun comes up in the morning, the ones connected to the battery charging function charge the batteries up, and as soon as they're going, the battery inverters start up, and then all your big AC ones start up. I actually have that system as well. There's a few panels I've got on the roof of the farm shed, and that's actually my bootstrap system. That's my belt and braces. And so, yeah, there's a couple of ways to do it. The easy one, honestly, is the genset.
So just sort of simplifying this for farmers, and I guess you don't want them ringing you daily, Simon. Maybe Kylie mightn't mind, but who would farmers go to? Do they talk to your consultancy, or is there other people in other states that you would recommend? Or
Kylie can probably answer that better than I. But what I would say is that all of the decent companies, and there are some decent companies around that install solar, have all got the hang of installing batteries as well. For them, it's just another piece of value add. So you can get a quote to have a solar and battery system installed and set up for you in any state in the country very happily, and they will hum away, as Kylie suggested, remarkably well. It's not rocket science anymore. It really isn't. It's one of the reasons we built this big system, Peter, was so that people could bowl along and say, so how hard is it to run? Well, it isn't, and how well does it work? Well, it works perfectly. We just wanted to have an example out there to say, yes, this stuff really can work very well indeed.
Very good. And
it's not actually hard.
Did you want to add something, Kylie?
Well, as you said, I'm obviously happy for them to contact me. We do have a network that we can work with them with. So yeah, more than happy for people listening out.
Very good. And that brings us to the end. But I would say this, we have some very smart people who have attended, and one of them is telling me that the average size of a family farm in Australia is 4,330 hectares. So now we know.
There you go.
Thank you very much. And
Thank
thanks, Kylie and Simon, for very interesting discussion today. Thank you.
Just there was one last question there about
Yep.
Free and Australia. We do work Australia wide, and as I mentioned, we do have local networks as well for that install sort of portion of it. So, yeah, anyone that we can help, I'm based in Brisbane, but we do work Australia wide.
Okay, and we'll have your contact details if any of our members call us.
Yes,
That's
and
good.
free government input. There is those grants and that as well, which Liz is happy to help anyone with if they're looking for that sort of support, regardless of who they're using.
Very good. So that brings us to the end of our webinar, and looks like Caleb is putting up some information, where to get information, so that's good. And I just remind people that our summit is coming up, and if you've got issues in global warming and renewables and all the issues that are currently facing farmers, then our summit is designed to try and develop policy going forward. So if you're interested, come along to Canberra in September and be there. Thank you.